Imagine celebrating your 30th birthday. Your family gathers around a fire, children laugh nearby. Your hair is still dark. Your body is strong. Your life feels like it's only beginning. Then someone from the future appears and tells you, "Congratulations, you've already lived longer than almost everyone in human history." It sounds believable. After all, we've all heard the same claim. Stone Age humans only lived to around 30 years old. It's repeated in documentaries, school textbooks, history articles, even casual conversations. The number has become so familiar that most people never stop to question it. But here's the problem. That famous number is technically true, and almost completely misleading. Ancient humans did not usually die because their bodies aged faster than ours. They died because far too many children never had the chance to become adults. Once you understand that single fact, the entire history of human life changes, and the real story is both more hopeful and far more heartbreaking than the myth we've repeated for decades. To understand why, we first need to ask a surprisingly simple question. What exactly does life expectancy actually mean? Most people assume life expectancy means the age an average adult dies, but that's not what the statistic measures. The famous Stone Age figure refers to life expectancy at birth. That tiny phrase changes everything. Life expectancy at birth counts every single baby born into a population. It includes healthy children, sick children, babies who survive for decades, and babies who die only hours after entering the world. Every one of those lives is added together before calculating the average. This means one tragic reality can pull the entire number dramatically downward. Imagine a village with only 10 children. 5 of them die before reaching their 5th birthday. The other 5 survive and live until they are 70 years old. Now calculate the average. The answer is only about 36 years. But notice something strange. Not a single person actually died from old age at 36. Half the village reached 70. The other half never reached adulthood. The average describes the population. It doesn't describe what happened to most individuals. This is almost exactly what happened in prehistoric societies. The famous number around 30 isn't telling us adults suddenly became old at 30. It's telling us that childhood was unbelievably dangerous. The moment someone survived those dangerous early years, their future changed dramatically. Researchers studying prehistoric skeletons and modern hunter-gatherer societies have reached a surprisingly consistent conclusion. If an individual survived until around 15 years old, living into their 60s or even 70s became entirely possible, not guaranteed, but certainly not unusual. In other words, ancient humans weren't biologically designed to die young. Many simply never had the chance to grow old. That raises another question. Why were so many children dying? The answer begins with something modern humans rarely have to think about anymore: disease. Today, a newborn enters a world filled with invisible protection: vaccine, antibiotics, hospitals, doctors, clean water, emergency surgery, intensive care units. None of those existed for almost the entire history of our species. A simple infection that today disappears after a few days of medicine could once become a death sentence. A fever, a cough, an infected cut, a stomach illness. Any one of them could quietly end a child's life. But infectious disease in prehistoric times wasn't quite the same as people often imagine. In fact, hunter-gatherers enjoyed one surprising advantage. They rarely lived in large permanent settlements. Most bands contained only a few dozen people. They moved constantly. They followed migrating animals. They searched for seasonal plants. Because groups stayed small and mobile, many of history's worst epidemic diseases couldn't survive. Diseases like measles, smallpox, and large-scale plague outbreaks need something very specific: crowds, thousands of people living close together. A disease can only keep spreading if new hosts remain available. If everyone in a tiny camp becomes infected, the disease quickly runs out of people to infect. The outbreak simply dies with the group. Ironically, some of humanity's deadliest epidemics didn't become common until civilization itself appeared. As farming spread across the world, everything changed. Villages became towns. Towns became cities. Humans lived closer together than ever before. Domesticated animals shared the same spaces. Waste accumulated. Water became contaminated. Suddenly, diseases had exactly what they needed: an endless supply of nearby victims. The agricultural revolution gave humanity more reliable food, but it also gave disease its greatest opportunity. For thousands of years afterward, crowded settlements often became far more dangerous than the wilderness humans had left behind. Even so, disease wasn't the only threat. For women, another danger followed almost every family: Childbirth. Today, childbirth remains one of the most carefully monitored medical events in human life. Doctors watch every heartbeat. Surgeons stand ready. Blood transfusions save lives. Antibiotics prevent infection. For prehistoric mothers, none of that existed. Every pregnancy carried real risk. A baby positioned incorrectly, severe bleeding, infection after birth, complications that modern hospitals solve within hours once had no solution at all. Anthropologists estimate that each birth may have carried roughly a 1 to 2% chance of killing the mother. That number sounds small, until you remember that many women gave birth 6, 8, sometimes even 10 times throughout their lives. Each pregnancy added another roll of the dice. Across an entire lifetime, the risk accumulated dramatically. Behind every prehistoric family tree lies an invisible number of mothers who never saw their children grow up. And beside every mother stood another life equally vulnerable: the newborn. Infant mortality shaped prehistoric life more than perhaps any other force. Modern parents expect their children to survive. Ancient parents hoped they would. In many prehistoric populations, somewhere between 30 and 50% of children never reached adulthood. Some died within weeks. Others survived a few years before disease, malnutrition, or simple bad luck caught them. These children never became hunters, never became parents, never became elders. Yet every one of those short lives entered the life expectancy calculation. Every loss quietly pulled the average lower. This is why the famous number around 30 tells us almost nothing about adult aging. Instead, it reveals something much sadder. Ancient societies weren't filled with 30-year-old old men. They were filled with grieving parents. And that changes the story completely. Before we continue, if you're enjoying uncovering the real stories hidden beneath history's biggest myths, consider subscribing to Human Stories. Every week, we explore surprising discoveries, forgotten civilizations, and fascinating truths that completely change how we see our past. Because sometimes, history isn't wrong. We've simply been asking the wrong question. Now that we understand why the average age was so low, another mystery appears. If adults often reach their 60s or 70s, why do so many people still believe ancient humans almost never became old? The answer lies not only in biology, but also inside the way archaeologists read bones buried thousands of years beneath the earth. Archaeologists have spent generations digging through ancient campsites, caves, and burial grounds, searching for clues about how our ancestors lived. But determining how long someone lived isn't nearly as simple as reading a birth certificate. Bones don't come with dates. Instead, scientists estimate age using subtle biological clues: the condition of the teeth, the shape of the pelvis, the density of bone, the way joints gradually change over time. These methods work remarkably well for children and young adults. But something unexpected happens as people grow older. The differences become harder to measure. Distinguishing a 20-year-old from a 30-year-old skeleton is often possible. Distinguishing a 60-year-old from a 70-year-old skeleton becomes much more difficult. For decades, many archaeological studies placed everyone above roughly 50 years old into a single category: older adult. That was it. A 52-year-old, a 68-year-old, a 75-year-old. They often disappeared into the same statistical group. Without realizing it, researchers were compressing decades of life into one broad category that made ancient populations appear younger than they actually were. As dating methods improved, something remarkable happened. Researchers began revisiting old collections. Skeletons once labeled simply as over 50 turned out to include many people who had lived far longer. The story wasn't changing because ancient humans suddenly became older. It was changing because our measurements became better. One famous example comes from the Libin archaeological site in Ohio. Earlier studies suggested relatively short adult lifespans. Later analyses using improved aging techniques revealed something different. Many individuals had lived well beyond what researchers originally believed. The lesson extended far beyond a single site. Sometimes history doesn't change because new evidence appears. It changes because we learn how to read the old evidence more carefully. Modern hunter-gatherer societies tell a remarkably similar story. Anthropologists studying groups such as the Hadza of Tanzania found elderly men and women living well into their 70s. These individuals weren't unusual exceptions. They played important roles inside their communities. They watched grandchildren, settled disagreements, remembered seasonal migrations, recognized edible plants, knew where water could still be found during drought. Knowledge became one of the most valuable survival tools in the entire group. This observation gave rise to one of the most fascinating ideas in evolutionary anthropology: the grandmother hypothesis. Among most mammals, females rarely live long after reproduction ends. Humans are different. Women often spend decades living beyond their childbearing years. From an evolutionary perspective, that seems strange. Why would natural selection preserve such a long lifespan after reproduction? One possible answer is surprisingly beautiful. Grandmothers helped families survive. While younger adults hunted, gathered food, or cared for newborns, older women watched children, prepared food, and passed down knowledge accumulated across an entire lifetime. Those families gained an advantage. Children survived more often. Skills spread more effectively. Entire communities became stronger. If ancient humans truly died around 30 years old, none of this would make evolutionary sense. There wouldn't have been enough grandmothers for natural selection to reward the trait. Their existence becomes evidence itself. Human beings didn't evolve expecting everyone to die young. We evolved expecting many adults to become elders. That doesn't mean growing old was easy. Life remained dangerous every single day. Violence claimed lives. Some prehistoric communities experienced deadly conflicts between neighboring groups. Archaeological sites reveal healed fractures, embedded spear points, and injuries caused by human weapons. Animal attacks posed another constant threat. A hunting accident could become fatal. A fall from a rocky cliff, a broken leg, a deep cut while butchering an animal. Today, these injuries often mean a trip to the emergency room. Thousands of years ago, they could mean something very different. Infection. Without antibiotics, bacteria became one of humanity's greatest predators. A wound that looks minor today could spread through the bloodstream within days. Pneumonia after an ordinary cold, an infected tooth, a scraped knee that never healed properly. Modern medicine has made these dangers feel almost ordinary. For most of human history, they were anything but ordinary. This brings us back to the famous number that started our journey, 30 years. It captures something real, but not what most people think. It doesn't describe when adults became old. It describes how many children never reached adulthood. Perhaps the greatest achievement of modern medicine isn't that humans suddenly learned to live longer. Our biological potential was already there. People capable of reaching 70 existed thousands of years ago. What changed wasn't the ceiling. It was the floor. Vaccines prevented childhood diseases. Clean water stopped deadly infections. Antibiotics turned once fatal wounds into routine medical problems. Safer childbirth saved mothers and babies alike. Emergency medicine rescued people who would once have disappeared from history. Humanity didn't dramatically increase the maximum age people could reach. Humanity dramatically increased the number of people who had the opportunity to reach it. And that may be an even greater achievement, because every elderly person represents more than a long life. They represent a child who survived, a mother who survived childbirth, an infection that never became fatal, an accident that didn't become the end. Behind every old face lies thousands of moments where death almost won. The myth that ancient humans died at 30 survives because it feels simple. Simple stories are easy to remember. Reality rarely is. The truth is more complicated, more emotional, and, in many ways, far more inspiring. Our ancestors were never fragile people trapped inside bodies that aged twice as fast as ours. They laughed, worked, raised families, watched grandchildren grow. Many carried wrinkles earned across decades of experience. The tragedy wasn't that adulthood ended early. The tragedy was that so many children never lived long enough to experience it. Perhaps that's the real lesson hidden beneath one of history's most misunderstood statistics. Every extra year of life we enjoy today isn't simply a gift of longer human biology. It's the result of thousands of years of medicine, sanitation, science, and shared knowledge protecting us from dangers that once claimed millions before adulthood ever began. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed uncovering the real story behind one of history's biggest myths, be sure to subscribe to Human Stories. Every week, we explore forgotten civilizations, surprising discoveries, and fascinating truths that reveal how humanity really survived, adapted, and shaped the world we live in today. Because history isn't just about the past, it's about understanding why our lives are possible today.